Moving along with the book, Doug talks about the cataclysm, the Torah, and the ancient alphabet. On the surface, it seems like the Ice Age and polar reversal have nothing to do with the Torah or the alphabet, but you really can't separate the three topics. One proves the other's validity and accuracy. Once you realize and accept that only a very highly advanced civilization could have developed the design of the original symbols, and you realize that the exact number of years between polar reversals is embedded in the Torah, you have to conclude that you are not reading a normal, ordinary book. The Torah is amazingly unique from anything else. An offshoot of these discoveries is the realization that Moses wrote a true story, but also that he placed a great number of codes and hidden stories within the Torah. I am sure that he did this so that someone would figure it out in the far distant future. Now, what is Doug's background for doing this, and what credibility or credentials might he have? Doug's story begins in 1972 when he and his friend Gary Sultan enunciated a very interesting idea. What if our universe was the product of information? They used the videotape analogy to help explain that type of universe. Or maybe The Sims. I've never played that, but from what I understand, I don't think he fully believed the fledgling's theory. It turned our familiar reality on its head, but I thought it was an interesting perspective back at that time, Doug says. Shortly thereafter, he started research on pyramids and found that an informational theory of existence would explain why objects are preserved when placed inside a pyramid made to a particular angle and dimension. Over the next 5 years, Doug conducted a variety of researches which included many of the subjects listed before. The result was his first book, Reality Revealed, The Multidimensional Reality Theory. This book laid the foundations of an informational theory of existence, which presented a possible explanation to the causes of the Ice Age, the polar reversal, and really a lot of other phenomena. Doug's research on the Hebrew Scriptures began in 1992 when he was doing research for his book on polar reversals and an update of Reality Revealed. He then came across the work of Stan Tenen, a Torah researcher in California who had rediscovered several models used by early Jewish scholars to unravel secrets of the Hebrew alphabet. He believed that Mr. Tenen had rediscovered lost medieval tools, which the rabbis had used in their studies of the Torah. His conclusion was not similar to what Doug intuitively thought the Hebrew letters actually represented. So he was seeing all kinds of connections with this new paradigm shift. Mr. Tenen came up with a shape which had too many turns in the middle, which he analogized as a flame in the middle of a tetrahedron. His conclusion was that the Hebrew alphabet was an existential expression of man's consciousness. He came up with hand models of each one of the letters. He explained represented an extension of our consciousness. Doug didn't agree with his conclusions, but he did feel like Mr. Tennant was onto something, and that what he had discovered was real. He also believed that it was heavily influenced by Orthodox tradition and dogma, which defined the alphabet. A researcher sometimes has to step back, says Doug, and say, what am I looking at? And let go of the assumptions that anyone knows what it is. And I'm sure that's, there isn't a way for us not to have some bias. There's just not a way. If we've lived, we've had experiences that are part of who we are. And it would be impossible. So that's a given, right? But at the same time, I want to interject here that when I first read Doug's work, it took me a long time to digest it. I had to learn a lot of different tools and things that weren't natural to my passions. And so it took some work. And during that time, I continued to learn other things, which have since led me to believe that some of the parts of Doug's research are also biased to his Orthodox upbringing. And that may or may not be true, but that's how I see it to be. And so where I'm trying to share with you and give his work respect and credit that it deserves. Who am I, right? Compared to his understanding and education and experience and all that. So I just wanted to put that out there. And so the result of a researcher's work made Doug, or Dr. Tennant, Mr. Tennant's work made Doug re-examine the Torah with the possibility that it was not a collection of mythology, but rather a true story with a lot of coding included in it. He spent from 1992 to 95 very carefully reading the Torah and the rest of the Hebrew scriptures and information concealed within the biblical stories. This was not the first time Doug read the Hebrew scriptures, because he was raised Orthodox and read his Bar Mitzvah Bible about 5 times before 1990, but mostly focused on the prophets, he says. This time that he read with an intention to thoroughly analyze and take apart the Torah and the later books. The first thing was to see if the number of years between polar reversals showed up in the Torah. Much to Doug's surprise, the number was there, just beneath the surface. Doug had to sum the totals of some of the numbers given in the generations of Adam and Seth, but there was no question that the number was embedded in the Torah. Within weeks of discovering that, Doug also figured out the actual length of the sacred cubit, which was also a function of the same number. When he multiplied the length of the sacred cubit by most of the numbers in the Torah, it produced the same primary number or a function of it, such as a quarter or a half the number, or 2 and 3 times the number. Keep in mind, the number he discovered is the exact number of years between polar reversals. This number and how Doug discovered it will all be explained in chapter 2, which is more about teaching the codes and that kind of thing than this, which I'm trying to follow word for word to give it justice. In chapter 2, once the unit of measure was discovered, Doug could actually decipher the message of the whole Torah and unravel it literally. The Torah has biblical surface stories which give clues to a number of important secrets. They reveal the location of Mount Sinai, the Exodus route, what Moses and the Hebrews did in the Sinai. Sorry, that's bothering me. Who put the advanced technology inside the family cave, what the real family lineage was, Joseph's real identity in Egypt, it's an amazing story, and what he actually did there. What happened to the lost generation that entered the Sinai, and lastly and most importantly, how the Torah can save mankind from cataclysm, which will be caused by the polar reversal. Doug was able to answer all these questions thanks to the clues Moses left in the Torah and because of his 3 geological expeditions to the area. All right, are you with me? When analyzing the Torah, the thought comes to mind, why did Moses conceal the location of the mount? Moses ended his descriptive Exodus route a substantial distance short of Mount Sinai and shy 19 days away. He ended his fairly descriptive travels at Rephidim, at the battle with Amalek. From the start of the Exodus route, Moses gave us a running description at the rate of every 1 to 12 days as to where they were and what they did. After the battle of Amalek, nothing. It's obvious that he was concealing the location of Mount Sinai, but the question is, was there something there that he was supposed to protect? Today's academic circles generally accept the theory that Mount Sinai is mythical because no accredited archaeologist has ever found it. Some scholars think that Moses was fictional as well, along with many of the earlier biblical characters. By the end of 1995, Doug had a very good idea about where the Mount Sinai was located and a strong hunch about one particular mount in the Sinai. In November of 1997 and November of 1999, he funded 2 geological expeditions to the area. As a result, found the real Mount Sinai. Doug found all of the altars described by Moses in Exodus at the correct location, distance, and direction which was given. Doug was the first person in 2,592 years who figured out where the real Mount Sinai was located. And he didn't have a father who was a high priest to show him where it was, because that's who has the goods, right? As a direct result of finding Mount Sinai and what was actually there, Doug was able to unravel the rest of the story Moses embedded within the biblical Torah story. Doug figured out answers to all the questions he previously listed that we've started out with, including some additional secrets which made the biblical story so much richer. Within the book, Doug's going to show us some of these altars, but won't disclose the real location of Mount Sinai at this time. He says that he holds back the location to protect the altars from the people there that hate the Jews and everything they stand for. And the book will only cover what the title says. The rest will be published in another book. And I know that this book was updated, but I'm not sure if he ever got to that part. I know that he was planning another expedition with his son, and I know that that didn't happen before he died. He was so clear-headed when I had lunch with him last June. The June before last. All right. During Doug's 59 years of life at the time he wrote this book, he observed 5 different viewpoints concerning the concept of God and organized religion. The first comes from a ruling class, which Doug classifies as intellectuals from academia, or the higher educated upper echelons of government bureaucracies. These individuals generally do not believe in a God defined as a supreme being or an intelligence of the universe. They tend to believe that intelligent life is the result of an accident or genetic probability played out over millions of years of evolution. They look at organized religion as a human invention to explain the mysteries of the universe. Organized religion has served to control and modify man's baser behaviors, for the most part for the better. Behaviors such as cannibalism, stealing, murder, slavery, lying, and incest have been eliminated or repressed through the positive efforts of organized religion. These behaviors needed to end so a coherent, stable society could develop. The ruling and intellectual classes believe in themselves as controllers of destiny, theirs and everyone else's. Since they believe that academia has explained most of the phenomena in the universe, there's no longer any need for a genuine belief in God as the creator of that universe, and there's no longer any need for a genuine belief in God as the creator of the universe and director of all action. This group does, however, desire the continuation of most popular organized religions because they control the masses for the purposes of those at the top. Religious cynicism rules the ruling class. The second group is the average working class. Members of this group have a high school or some college education and work for a living. They generally believe in a God and identify with one of the major religions, tending to believe in what their political and leadership tells them. Their main concern is to create the good life by getting ahead in the material world that we live in. Organized religion has its place and usually doesn't interfere with their work, their family goals, or their sports agendas. The third group Doug calls free spirits. They seem to have been disillusioned with the mainline religions and politics and gravitated towards New Age religious movements. This phenomena seems to be most prevalent in first world countries such as in Europe and in the U.S. Free spirits seem to be the most closely associated with ecumenism. They may include agnostics who don't know or care about anything but want to affiliate with something for social convention. The fourth group is the poor and uneducated of the world. The majority of them steadfastly believe in a God, and their belief is sometimes the only stable thing in their lives. Sometimes they can count on it to give them some meaning and hope. They obediently try to follow the precepts of their religion and generally follow the edicts of their religious leadership, right or wrong. The fifth group encompasses the vast majority of scientists, especially physicists. The religion for them is science, the procedure and the process of disclosure. Their philosophy is if you can't measure it, weigh it, see it, or detect it in a bubble chamber, and most importantly, get grant money from it, it doesn't exist. Not surprisingly, this group most closely resembles atheists and the philosophy of the atomists of ancient Greece or the Stoics of Rome. For instance, in the medical profession, doctors are taught that life is the result of electrochemical reactions of the body and brain. At the moment of death, the brain has hallucinations that explain the many stories of individuals who have clinically died and come back to life, and the strange stories of an existence after death. Dreams are explained away as our subconscious interpretation of the day's activities. There is no such thing as psychic phenomena that can't be explained by scientific procedure. People who play God do not believe in God. There are no mysteries of the universe that can't be explained by man, of course, given through enough government money, preferably lots of it. Atheists exist in all these groups, and they believe that there is no God. Organized religion to them is just a man-made concoction used for population control. Atheists are also disillusioned with organized religion, that they reject everything associated with it. They look at the Hebrew Scriptures as an old Jewish mythology with no relevance to modern-day man or society. They strictly believe in themselves as the masters of their own destinies. Their moral code stems from the civil statutes of their state and national governments. When one believes in nothing, one tends to obey the laws which suit one for the moment, or one can always create one's own code of moral conduct. If you feel that people should not be grouped into broad categories, don't take personal offense. Doug is attempting to illustrate that just within our own society, there are many different viewpoints on God and religion, even within a society which predominantly is a one-religion majority. Worldwide, there are geographic and cultural reasons why so many religious philosophies began. Some believe in a man as being the visitation of God on this planet. Others believe in God as an all-powerful, unseen creator and controller of the universe. In the Far East, Taoism, Buddhism, and Confucianism developed. These religions don't have a God concept in the sense of a sole creator of the universe, but focus on a philosophy of cause and effect in the material and spiritual worlds. The only concept that remotely resembles a God figure is their idea of a universal consciousness, but this concept is only present in some schools of thought. The other religions man has created are Judaism, Hinduism, Islam, Christianity, and finally, we find nature worship among the native populations of the Americas and Africa. Some of these religions believe in multiple gods representing forces of nature. Philosophical diversity among religions has caused tremendous human conflict and hatred between various groups up to the present day. I've experienced so much of that. The reason for these ideological differences is that no one had yet defined what God is and what he is not. The only way we can possibly do that, says Doug, is to develop an accurate model of how the universe really works. And once we know that, and only then do we have a chance to understand what God's relationship is with his creation. This book hopefully will explain this relationship and bring men closer together and closer to the Creator. The Torah message is only decipherable if you first understand a totally different theory of existence. Doug repeats the following statement a number of times in this book so that it sticks with you. The universe is the product of information, and from this information, it creates the matter world we live in. Got it? The universe is the product of information, and from this information, it creates the matter world that we live in. That comes from the theory of multidimensional reality. In chapter 2, Doug takes us through the steps that he took when discovering the true length of the sacred cubit and how he used this measure to unlock the secret messages within the Torah and the rest of the Hebrew scriptures. The Hebrew alphabet will be explained in one of the chapters following after his informational theory has been described. The model for the alphabet will prove that we're dealing with a highly advanced previous civilization which created the document to memorialize something very important. These Torah discoveries, coupled with scientific explanation of what causes the ice ages, the polar reversals, and the exact number of years for the cycle, produces a powerful and urgent message for us, perhaps for the first time in our lives. Some of these chapters will deal with technical subjects, but keep in mind that this is the only way they can be explained. If you understand the principles that make up the Hebrew alphabet and the Torah, that you will begin to understand and find that most of the time the path to knowledge is a difficult, winding one, but it's a necessary road that we have to travel to understand any higher type of revelation. Some of these chapters, we are in the end of days, which is a fixed block of time before the coming cataclysm. Doug will explain when the time started and why God intervenes during this time to help man understand what existence really is. God reveals to man where we went wrong in the hope that we will change and thereby save ourselves from the polar reversal. After more than 35 years of research and study, Doug came to the conclusion that there is only one path and one body of knowledge which God wants us to evolve to. We, of course, have the power of free will, which sometimes evolves to destructive behavior. After 12,000 years of free will, either we will evolve to understand how the universe really works, or else we and our society will be wiped off the face of the earth in one day. The very few who survive will be the ones who will create the next civilization for better or for worse. The life of man, as well as every living thing in the universe, is a story of evolution, evolving to what God's relationship is with the universe. Think of this book as your journey on a newly discovered road to learning, a body of knowledge which has been hidden from man for over 2,500 years. Some of this knowledge will be frightening, and some will be awe-inspiring. But Doug's promise is that you will soon understand more about how the universe works and what God's relationship is to his creation.